Single dad CEO mistakenly sends his daughter to the wrong school, only to meet a young teacher. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. The morning rain in New York City came down in soft silver lines, tapping against the windshield of a black sedan. Inside, Ethan Cole adjusted his tie with one hand while balancing a coffee cup in the other. His daughter, 6-year-old Lila, sat in the back seat with her backpack hugged to her chest. She was quiet, tracing shapes on the fogged window. Ethan glanced at her through the rear-view mirror, guilt flickering in his eyes. "Big day, sweetheart," he said, forcing a smile. "First day at your new school." Lila nodded, her voice barely a whisper. "Will you come inside with me, Daddy?" Ethan hesitated. The clock on the dashboard glowed 7:45. His meeting with the board began at 8:30 sharp. He cleared his throat. "Of course I will, just for a minute." He pulled up in front of the brick building with a sign that read, St. Mary's Community School. Rain dripped from the edge of his umbrella as he hurried her to the front door. Children in bright raincoats darted past, their laughter rising over the hum of traffic. A young teacher was waiting at the steps, her hair tied in a loose bun, the edges damp from the drizzle. Her name tag read, Miss Mia Torres. She smiled warmly at Lila, kneeling to her height. "Good morning, sweetheart. You must be our new student," Mia said, her tone kind and steady. Lila nodded, clutching her drawing pad tighter. Ethan exhaled, relieved. "Thank you, Miss Torres, is it? I have to run, but her lunch is in the side pocket. I will pick her up at 3. Mia blinked. "Of course, Mr. Cole." Ethan was already walking away, phone pressed to his ear, his shoes splashing through shallow puddles as his driver opened the car door. The sedan merged into traffic, disappearing beneath the gray skyline. Inside the classroom, Lila took a seat near the window, rain streaking the glass beside her. Mia scanned the attendance sheet, her brow furrowed. There was no Lila Cole listed anywhere. She double-checked the transfer file, then glanced toward the little girl who was now quietly opening her sketchbook. "Sweetheart," she said softly, kneeling beside her desk. "Can you tell me which school you were supposed to come to today?" Lila tilted her head. "St. Mary's," she answered innocently. "Daddy said this was the right one." Mia hesitated. There was another St. Mary's across town, a private academy, not this small community school with its flickering lights and chipped paint. She smiled gently to hide her confusion. "All right, honey, you can stay with us until we figure it out, okay?" Lila nodded, flipping open her sketchbook. The first page showed a tall man in a gray suit, standing inside a glass tower, looking down at a small heart drawn in red crayon. Beneath it, in shaky letters, she had written, "Daddy works too much, but he loves me." Mia felt her throat tighten. She looked toward the window, rain reflecting the faint outline of a man's car, already far down the street. Somewhere out there, a father was racing to a meeting, unaware he had just left his daughter at the wrong school and in doing so, had set in motion the best mistake of his life. The next morning, sunlight poured weakly through the gray New York haze, warming the corner of a small apartment above a bakery. Inside, Mia Torres stirred her coffee, watching steam rise from the chipped mug. Her mother's gentle voice came from the kitchen. "You were up late again," Mrs. Torres said. "Lesson plans?" Mia smiled faintly. "A new student showed up yesterday. Well, sort of." Her father dropped her off at the wrong school. Her mother laughed softly. "That sounds like a movie." Mia's eyes softened. "She is such a sweet girl, though, Lila." She drew this picture of her dad working in a glass tower. Said he works too much but still loves her. Broke my heart a little. Her mother nodded knowingly. Kids see more than we think. By the time Mia reached the classroom, the smell of chalk and crayons filled the air. Children buzzed around, hanging backpacks, sharing stories of cereal spills and lost homework. Lila was already there, sitting quietly by the window again, sketching with the focus of someone much older. "Good morning, sunshine," Mia greeted, setting her tote bag on the desk. Lila smiled shyly. "Hi, Miss Torres. Did your dad say anything about yesterday's mix-up?" Lila shook her head. "He said he was very busy, but he will fix it today." She hesitated, then added in a whisper, "I hope he forgets." Mia blinked. "Why do you hope that?" The little girl looked down at her drawing. "Because I like it here." Mia's heart softened again. She knelt beside her. "You can stay as long as we figure it out, okay? I am glad you like it." Lila's grin widened, small and honest. Across town, inside a steel and glass office tower that touched the clouds, Ethan Cole sat behind a desk of polished walnut. The city stretched below him like a living map. His assistant, Daniel, read from a tablet. "Sir, the quarterly report is ready, and the charity gala confirmation is due today." Ethan nodded absently, pen tapping against a file. His mind was elsewhere. "Sir?" Daniel prompted. Ethan looked up. "Do you have a daughter, Daniel?" Daniel blinked. "No, sir." "Why?" Ethan sighed, leaning back. "Mine asked me to come inside with her yesterday. I barely made it through the door before I left. I do not even know if she was nervous or happy." Daniel hesitated. "You could call the school, check on her." "I will," Ethan said, but his tone carried doubt. His phone buzzed. A reminder. Board meeting in 20 minutes. He stood, straightened his jacket, and pushed personal thoughts aside. Yet as he glanced at the family photo on his desk, Lila in a blue dress, her smile missing one front tooth, the guilt returned like a quiet ache. Back at St. Mary's Community School, the class moved into art hour. Paper rustled, crayons rolled. Mia moved from table to table, encouraging small hands and big imaginations. When she reached Lila, the girl had drawn a tall building under rain clouds. At the top, a man stood alone behind glass. Next to it, she added a second drawing herself, and Mia beneath a bright Sunday. Mia paused, throat tight. "Those are beautiful," she said softly. Lila smiled. "I want Daddy to see them." The afternoon passed quickly. The final bell rang, and the hallway filled with the cheerful chaos of backpacks and wet boots. Mia watched from the doorway as parents collected their children. Then she saw him. Ethan Cole, tall, composed, still in his suit, stepping through the door with the uncertain look of a man out of place. "Miss Torres?" he asked politely. Mia nodded, offering her hand. "You must be Lila's father. I am so sorry about the confusion yesterday." He returned the handshake, warm but brief. "Entirely my fault. I must have entered the wrong address into my calendar." Mia smiled. "It happens more often than you think." Lila came running from the back, her small arms wrapping around his leg. "Daddy, can we come back here tomorrow?" Ethan froze for a heartbeat, caught between his daughter's joy and his schedule. He looked at Mia, who met his gaze with quiet curiosity. "I think," he said slowly, "we might be able to arrange that." Outside, the rain had stopped. Sunlight broke through the clouds, and for the first time in a long while, Ethan Cole felt something unfamiliar, a moment of stillness, the kind that makes a man realize what truly matters. As they walked toward the car, Lila slipped her tiny hand into his, still clutching her sketchbook. Mia stood at the doorway, watching them go, unaware that this small accident had just changed the course of all their lives. The week passed more quickly than either of them expected. Each morning, Ethan parked near the same curb, walked Lila to the door of St. Mary's Community School, and exchanged a polite greeting with Miss Torres. What had begun as a simple mistake started to feel like a small ritual, a pause between the cold rush of business meetings and the warmth of his daughter's smile. One Thursday morning, the rain had returned, falling in fine silver lines across the windshield. Lila chattered beside him, her voice soft but animated. "Daddy, Miss Torres says we can make an art wall for our favorite drawings." Ethan smiled faintly. "That sounds wonderful. What are you going to draw?" She looked thoughtful. "You, but not in your office. Maybe here." She pointed toward the school building. "With me." Ethan's hand tightened around the steering wheel. The words lingered longer than he expected. "I would like that," he said quietly. Inside the classroom, Mia was pinning colorful sketches to the corkboard when they arrived. She turned as Ethan entered with his daughter, both slightly damp from the drizzle. "Good morning, Mr. Cole," she said, cheerful as always. He nodded, awkward but sincere. "Morning, Miss Torres." He looked around at the cheerful chaos of the room, the mismatched chairs, the posters of alphabets, the smell of crayons and glue. It was nothing like the sleek halls of Coltech. It felt alive. Mia noticed his gaze. Not exactly the kind of place a CEO usually finds himself in. She teased lightly, unaware that he had not mentioned his position. He smiled. "Let us just say it is different from my usual boardroom." Lila was already at her desk, unpacking her sketchbook. The pages were filled with scenes of sunlight, rain, and tall glass buildings turned soft by crayon colors. One drawing caught Mia's eye. A man and a little girl standing under an umbrella, the words "Best Day," written in careful, childlike letters. "That is lovely," she said. Lila grinned. "It is me and Daddy." He remembered the umbrella today. Ethan laughed quietly, a sound so rare it startled him. "I am learning," he said. When he finally left for work, the sound of children's laughter stayed in his mind longer than the hum of the city traffic. By the time he reached his office, his secretary noticed something unusual. "You are smiling, sir," she said. He glanced at her, surprised. "Am I?" She nodded. "It suits you." That evening, after another long day of meetings, Ethan returned home. The penthouse was immaculate, silent, and empty except for the soft hum of the refrigerator. He loosened his tie and walked past the framed photos on the wall, images of corporate success, not a single one of family. He paused at the kitchen counter, where Lila's backpack rested. She had forgotten her sketchbook. He opened it carefully. On one page, a new drawing showed 3 figures: a girl, a man, and a woman with brown hair tied back. Above them, a sun beamed down with the words, "Happy Family," written in red. Ethan stood there for a long time, the quiet pressing against him. He thought about calling Mia to tell her Lila had left the book behind, but the idea of hearing her voice made his heart race in a way he did not understand. Instead, he set the sketchbook on the dining table and stared out at the city lights flickering beyond the glass. The next morning, he returned it in person. Mia looked surprised when she saw him at the classroom door before the bell. "You did not have to come all the way," she said. He smiled slightly. "It was on my way." She took the sketchbook from his hand, their fingers brushing briefly. The contact was accidental but lingered in both their minds. "Thank you," she said softly. Ethan glanced at the wall of children's drawings. "You have built something special here." Mia's expression warmed. "It is nothing fancy, but they love it. It gives them a place to dream." He nodded. "Dreams are important." There was a pause, quiet but charged, filled with the hum of small voices and the smell of wet paint. Then Lila's laughter broke the silence, and Mia smiled. "She is happy here, Mr. Cole. She feels safe." Ethan looked toward his daughter, who was showing another child how to blend colors. "That is because of you," he said. Their eyes met again, steady this time. It was not a moment of confession. Not yet. But something unspoken began to take root, an understanding, fragile and real. Outside, the rain had stopped. Sunlight spilled through the windows, catching on the wet pavement. For the first time in years, Ethan Cole felt that maybe the world had more color than gray. He did not know it yet, but a simple sketchbook had just become the heart of his story. Saturday morning came with a bright sky and the faint scent of wet pavement after rain. Lila was at the table, coloring, while Ethan stood at the kitchen counter, stirring coffee he did not really need. The quiet hum of the city below felt softer than usual. "Daddy," Lila said without looking up. "Miss Torres is fixing the old board in our classroom. She said it keeps falling down." Ethan looked over. "The one where you hang your art?" She nodded, serious. "She said she will fix it with glue, but I think it needs a hammer." He smiled faintly. "Maybe I can help." That afternoon, Ethan drove them back to St. Mary's Community School. The building looked smaller in the daylight, worn but full of life. Children's drawings fluttered in the hallway like tiny flags of imagination. He found Mia in the empty classroom, sleeves rolled up, holding a screwdriver that was clearly too small for the job. "Need an extra hand?" he asked from the doorway. Mia turned, startled, then smiled. "Mr. Cole, you did not have to come." "Apparently the board is a structural hazard," he said lightly. "Corporate emergency." She laughed softly. "Well, in that case, I am glad headquarters responded. Oh? For the next hour, they worked side by side. The sound of nails, the scent of old wood, and Lila's occasional giggle filled the air. Ethan's jacket hung on a chair, his shirt sleeves rolled up, a smudge of chalk dust marking his cuff. When the last screw was tightened, Mia stepped back to admire their work. It actually looks straight, she said. Ethan handed her the screwdriver. Credit goes to management oversight. Mia shook her head. Or teamwork. Their eyes met again, warm and unguarded. There was an ease between them now, something that had grown quietly over shared laughter and small kindnesses. As they packed up, Lila tugged on Ethan's sleeve. Daddy, can Miss Torres come with us for ice cream? Mia hesitated. Oh, I should, Ethan interrupted, smiling. You cannot say no to that face. She looked at Lila's pleading eyes and gave in. All right, but just one scoop. They walked together to the small parlor down the street. The shop smelled of vanilla and roasted nuts. Lila sat between them, her chin dusted with chocolate. For the first time in months, Ethan laughed freely, the sound deep and genuine. Mia watched him from across the table. There was no trace of the rushed executive she had first met, only a man quietly rediscovering joy. She found herself smiling too, not because of anything said, but because the air around them felt easy, almost familiar. When they stepped outside again, the sky had turned gold. Lila skipped ahead, swinging her sketchbook like a treasure. Ethan glanced at Mia. You know, he said, I have not spent a Saturday afternoon like this in years. Mia looked at him, eyes soft. Then maybe you needed to. He nodded, thoughtful. Maybe I did. For a moment, they stood in comfortable silence, the light catching on the shop window beside them. Lila's laughter echoed down the sidewalk, bright and full of life. Ethan turned to Mia. Thank you, he said simply. For what? For reminding me what real life feels like. Mia smiled, unsure how to answer. She only knew that this man, who had walked into her classroom by mistake, was no longer a stranger. As they watched Lila chase a butterfly near the curb, the sound of the city faded into something softer, something that felt like hope. And though none of them could have known it yet, this quiet afternoon would become the memory they would all return to when everything changed. Monday arrived with the kind of sunlight that promised a good week. Ethan walked Lila to school again, carrying her backpack while she skipped ahead, humming to herself. Each step felt easier now, as if the hurried rhythm of his life had finally slowed just enough for him to notice small things, the sound of her laughter, the smell of chalk and rain, the way the world looked when he was not staring at a screen. When they reached the door, Mia was waiting, holding a paper coffee cup in one hand and a stack of worksheets in the other. Her smile came easily, bright against the early morning chill. Good morning, Mr. Cole, she greeted. Good morning, Miss Torres, he replied, returning the smile. I see your class survived the art wall installation. Barely, she teased. But the kids love it. They call it our dream corner. Lila beamed proudly. Daddy fixed it. Mia laughed. Yes, he did. And we could not have done it without him. Ethan crouched beside his daughter. Remember, dream corner or not, listen to Miss Torres, okay? Lila nodded solemnly. I always do. Oh, he looked up at Mia once more, almost reluctant to leave. See you this afternoon. As he turned away, Mia caught herself watching him longer than she should have. There was something quietly human in the way he knelt to tie Lila's shoelace. Something that made her chest tighten in a way she could not explain. The day unfolded gently. During recess, Mia noticed Lila sitting by the steps, drawing with careful strokes. When she asked what it was, Lila showed her a picture of 3 people standing under a bright Sunday. That is you, Daddy, and me, she said proudly. It is for the dream corner. Mia blinked away the sudden warmth in her eyes. It is beautiful, sweetheart. Your dad will love it. Meanwhile, in his office high above the city, Ethan's attention drifted from the graphs on his screen to the framed photo of Lila on his desk. His assistant, Daniel, cleared his throat. Sir, about the upcoming education fundraiser Coltech is expected to match last year's donation. Ethan nodded distractedly. Remind me where it is held. The same as every year, the Westbrook Hotel Ballroom, Daniel answered. Would you like to attend in person this time? Ethan hesitated. Normally he would delegate such events, but something stirred inside him. Yes, he said finally. Send the confirmation. and make sure St. Mary's Community School is included on the invitation list. Later that afternoon, Ethan arrived early to pick up Lila. The classroom buzzed with children finishing their drawings. Mia looked up from her desk, surprised but pleased. "You are early today," he smiled. "Meeting canceled. Thought I would trade a conference room for crayons." Mia laughed. "Good trade." They stood watching the children for a moment, the light spilling through the windows in golden lines. Lila waved her drawing. "Daddy, look, Miss Torres said we can hang it on the wall." "Oh." He knelt beside her, admiring the picture. "That is perfect," he said. "I think it deserves a special spot." Mia smiled. She has been talking about this one all day. Ethan straightened, glancing at the clock. "I was wondering, Miss Torres, the foundation is hosting a fundraiser next week. It is to support community schools like this one. Would you and your class like to attend?" Her eyes widened. "Us? I mean, we do not usually get invited to those kinds of events." "Oh, consider this an exception," he said, his tone gentle but firm. "You have built something meaningful here. People should see it." For a moment, she could only nod. "Thank you, Mr. Cole. The children will be thrilled." As he left that day, Mia stood by the window, watching him cross the parking lot. She realized she was smiling again, without meaning to. That evening, she stayed late, helping Lila finish a mural for the fundraiser. When the little girl finally fell asleep on a pile of art paper, Mia covered her with a soft blanket. She looked at the child's peaceful face and whispered, "You really are your father's light, aren't you?" At the same time, across the city, Ethan sat at his dining table, surrounded by papers and contracts he could not focus on. The apartment felt quieter than usual. His phone buzzed with unread messages, but his attention lingered on a small object near his coffee cup, Lila's box of crayons. She had left it behind again. He turned the box in his hands and smiled faintly. Inside were colors dulled from use, red worn to a stub, blue broken in half. He thought about Mia's classroom, about her patience, about the life she had built from almost nothing. And for the first time in years, he realized that maybe wealth was not measured in numbers, but in the moments that money could never buy. As the city lights shimmered against the night, Ethan set the crayons beside his phone and made a quiet decision. He would not let this connection fade into another lost opportunity. Whatever came next, he would make sure the world that Mia and Lila had shown him, a world of color, warmth, and small kindness, never slipped away again. The night of the fundraiser arrived with a glittering skyline and the hum of luxury cars pulling up to the grand entrance of the Westbrook Hotel ballroom. Inside, chandeliers shimmered like frozen stars, and the air carried the faint scent of perfume and polished marble. It was a world far removed from the paint-streaked walls of St. Mary's Community School. Mia adjusted the hem of her modest navy dress, feeling slightly out of place among the sequins and tuxedos. The children from her class, including Lila, were gathered near the small exhibition area that displayed their artwork. The theme was Dreams of Tomorrow, and each painting told a story of innocence, hope, and color. "Miss Torres," a deep voice said from behind her. She turned. Ethan Cole stood there, dressed in a black suit, calm and elegant. The crowd parted subtly around him, the way it always did for men who carried quiet authority. For a moment, Mia could hardly recognize him. "Mr. Cole," she said softly, smiling. "You clean up well." He smiled back. "So do you. The kids did a wonderful job. I think their wall is stealing the attention from the investors. I will take that as the best compliment we could get." He glanced toward Lila, who was explaining her drawing to a couple of guests. "She has your warmth," Mia said, watching him watch his daughter. Ethan's smile faded slightly. "She deserves more of my time than I have given her." Mia looked at him, her tone gentle. "You are here now. That is what she will remember." Or, before he could answer, the host's voice echoed through the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome tonight's guest of honor, Mr. Ethan Cole, Chief Executive Officer of Cole Tech Foundation." Mia froze. The applause began to rise around her, polite and admiring. She turned toward him, eyes widening as the truth sank in. He stepped forward, taking the stage. His words were calm and measured as he spoke about education, community, and the importance of nurturing creativity in children. Yet Mia barely heard any of it. All she could think about was how he had stood in her classroom pretending to be an ordinary father, never once mentioning who he really was. When he finished his speech, the crowd erupted in applause once more. Cameras flashed. He stepped down, but his eyes searched the room until they found hers. The warmth that had filled her only moments ago now felt like fire under her skin, sharp, burning, confusing. He approached slowly, uncertain. "Mia." She cut him off, her voice quiet but firm. "You are the guest of honor? The man who funds half the schools in the city? You let me think you were just a dad trying to do his best?" Ethan's jaw tightened. "That is what I am. A dad trying to do his best." "You lied," she said, hurt spilling through every word. "You walked into my classroom and let me open up to you, and all this time you were someone else." "I never wanted to deceive you," he said, his voice low. "I only wanted to feel normal for once, to be seen as a father, not a headline." Mia shook her head, stepping back. Normal people do not have to hide who they are. The music swelled again, drowning their voices. Around them, the ballroom shimmered with laughter and applause, but the space between them had turned cold. Lila ran up then, holding Mia's hand, her eyes wide. "Daddy, are you okay?" Ethan knelt, forcing a smile. "I am fine, sweetheart." Mia gently squeezed Lila's shoulder. "Go show your dad your painting, honey." The little girl turned, proud and unaware of the tension. As she ran toward her display, Mia's eyes lingered on Ethan for one last moment. "You did not have to pretend to be one of us," she whispered. "You already were." Then she turned and walked away, her figure disappearing into the crowd of glittering strangers. Ethan stood there, silent, watching the woman who had unknowingly changed his life slip out of his reach. The applause rose again for another speech, but to him, it sounded distant like rain hitting glass, steady and hollow. The morning after the gala, rain swept through the city again, washing away the glitter and lights that had filled the ballroom the night before. Inside his penthouse, Ethan stood by the window, watching drops race down the glass. His reflection looked unfamiliar, a man who had everything except peace. Lila sat at the table eating cereal, humming softly. Her art project from the gala leaned against the wall, still bright with color. She looked up at her father and frowned. "Daddy, did Miss Torres get mad at you?" Ethan turned, startled. "Why would you think that, sweetheart?" "She looked sad last night," Lila said. "She did not even say goodbye." Ethan sighed and sat beside her. Sometimes adults say things they do not mean when they are hurt. Lila tilted her head. "Did you hurt her?" He hesitated. "Maybe I did." She handed him a crayon, the blue one worn down to half its size. "Then you should fix it." Ethan stared at the small crayon in his hand, remembering the box he had kept on his desk. "Maybe you are right," he murmured. Across town, Mia sat in her quiet classroom long after the students had left. The sound of rain tapping the windows filled the silence. She replayed the moment from the gala over and over in her mind, the shock, the confusion, the sting of feeling foolish. She was angry, yes, but beneath that anger was something more painful, disappointment. She whispered to herself, "Why did you not just tell me?" The door creaked open, and the principal, Mrs. Green, stepped in. "Mia, everyone is talking about the event last night. They say Ethan Cole personally thanked the school in his speech." Mia forced a smile. "That is kind of him." Mrs. Green studied her face. "Are you all right?" "I will be," Mia said softly. "I just need to focus on the kids." Later that week, Ethan arrived at the school, unannounced. He stood in the doorway for a moment, watching Mia read to the children. Her voice was calm, steady, the same voice that had once soothed his daughter and, unknowingly, soothed him too. When the story ended, he approached quietly. "Mia," he said. She turned, her expression unreadable. "Mr. Cole, I wanted to apologize," he said. "Not as a CEO, not as anyone important, just as a man who made a mistake." Her arms folded gently. "You should not have to hide to be seen." "I know," he said. "But I did not want you to look at me the way everyone else does. I wanted to feel human again." Mia's eyes softened for just a moment, but the hurt was still there. "You did not need to pretend to earn kindness, Ethan. You already had it." He nodded slowly, accepting her words. "I understand. And I do not expect you to forgive me." He paused, then added, But I meant every word I said last night about what you do here. It matters more than any speech I have ever given. Oh." Before she could answer, Lila came running in from the hallway, her backpack bouncing. "Daddy! Miss Torres! Look! I made a new picture." She held up a drawing of 3 figures holding hands under a rainbow. The caption read, "My teacher, my dad, me." The sight broke something open in both adults. Mia smiled faintly, her voice barely above a whisper. "That is beautiful, Lila." Ethan crouched beside his daughter, his voice thick. "It really is." Mia looked at them for a long moment, her heart torn between pride and pain. "She is lucky to have you," she said softly. Ethan met her gaze. "No, I am the lucky one." For a moment, the rain outside softened, and the world grew quiet again. They stood there, connected by a small child's drawing, and the unspoken truth that sometimes love begins with the mistakes we are brave enough to face. 2 weeks passed. The air grew colder, and the first hints of autumn colored the trees outside St. Mary's Community School. The tension between Ethan and Mia had softened into a quiet distance. He still brought Lila every morning, but their conversations had become brief, polite, restrained. Then, one Monday, the entire school gathered in the courtyard. A large banner hung across the old fence. Lila's Art Room. A gift from the Coltech Foundation. Mia stood frozen as she read the words. The children clapped, their cheers echoing through the yard. The new classroom at the back of the building gleamed with fresh paint, wide windows, and shelves stacked with art supplies, brushes, colors, easels, sketchpads. Ethan stepped forward, speaking to the crowd, his voice steady. "This is not a donation. It is a thank you to every teacher who gives children a reason to dream." He turned toward Mia, his eyes soft but certain. "Especially to the one who reminded me what dreams look like." Applause rose again, and Mia blinked hard against the sting in her eyes. Lila ran to her, pulling her hand. "Miss Torres, Daddy said this room is for you too, so you can help more kids draw happy things." Mia knelt beside her, smiling through tears. "It is beautiful, sweetheart. You must be very proud of him." Lila nodded. "He said it is for us." When the crowd began to disperse, Ethan approached quietly. He held out a small, worn box, the same box of crayons Lila had left at his apartment. "I think these belong here," he said. Mia looked at the box, then at him. "You did not have to do this." "I did," he replied. "Because kindness should always come full circle." For a moment, they stood in silence, surrounded by laughter and sunlight. The wind carried the scent of new paint and chalk dust. Mia finally spoke, her voice soft. "You kept your promise, Ethan." He smiled faintly. "You were the one who taught me how." "Oh?" As children ran through the new art room, filling it with color and joy, the space between them no longer felt like regret, it felt like a beginning. A year later, the morning sun poured gently through the tall windows of Lila's art room. The walls were alive with colored children's drawings of families, dreams, and bright worlds that only young hearts could imagine. In the center hung one special piece, the first drawing Lila ever made at St. Mary's. It showed a man, a teacher, and a little girl standing under a rainbow, smiling together. That day marked the 1-year anniversary of the classroom's opening. Parents, teachers, and students filled the room with laughter and the soft hum of celebration. A small stage stood at the front, decorated with paper flowers and ribbons made by the children. Ethan arrived carrying a tray of cupcakes, wearing a white shirt instead of a suit. Lila ran up and hugged him tightly. "You remembered," she said, giggling. "I would not miss this for anything," he replied, kissing the top of her head. Mia was by the window, arranging a few more art pieces on display. When she turned and saw him, her smile came easily, now warm, steady, familiar. "You actually baked those yourself?" she asked playfully. He laughed. "Let us just say the bakery downstairs gave me a lot of help." Oh, they stood side by side as the principal began to speak, thanking the Coltech Foundation for its continued support and praising Mia's dedication to the students. The applause that followed was heartfelt, but what caught Mia's attention was Ethan's quiet expression beside her. He looked content, grounded, and for the first time, truly at home. When the speeches ended, Lila climbed up on the small stage and held the microphone with both hands. This room started because of a mistake, she said proudly, her voice echoing. Daddy dropped me off at the wrong school. But Miss Torres said sometimes mistakes can lead to something beautiful. So this is for everyone who ever made a mistake and tried again. The crowd cheered, and Mia's eyes glistened. Ethan reached for her hand, his voice low. Out of every deal I've ever made, this one means the most. Mia squeezed his hand gently. Because it was never a deal, it was a choice. Outside, the sky opened in soft light, and the trees swayed in a warm breeze. Children spilled into the playground, their laughter rising like music. Ethan looked at Mia, then at Lila, who was spinning under the sun, her sketchbook fluttering in her hands. I used to think success was about building towers, he said quietly. But this is what it really means to build something that lasts. Mia smiled. You finally drew your happiness, Ethan. He nodded. And you helped me color it in. No. As they watched their daughter run through the light, her laughter filling the air, it was clear that the best mistake he had ever made had led him exactly where he was meant to be home.